Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it's Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. But this week, obviously, we are wrapping up 2025, and while we're basically a Sunday or two away from the new year, I like to do this now because obviously I've got other things planned for breaches of the week on Sundays. But we want to make sure that we are talking about the craziest breaches of 2025. And as you can see here, basically, we are going to start with the United States that has the majority of the big breaches, to Canada, to France, to China, Australia. We are going around the world this year with data breaches. And first things first, let's start with some of the notes here. First, these are in no particular order. Basically, I chose these not just due to like size count of records lost, but also impact as well and scalability, et cetera, et cetera. So these are in no order except for the last one, which is arguably the largest breach in history as it stands right now in the digital age. 2025, you did not disappoint for disasters. And if you're a longtime listener and follower, you know that basically I do breaches of the week every Sunday. And so, oh boy, I covered this one a while ago. And don't forget, like I said, every Sunday I've got new videos and podcasts and all of that come out. I also do this on my nationally syndicated radio show, hopefully on an NPR or public radio affiliate near you. And so with that, let's dive in to breach number one. Now, I recently just did this the other week or so, and this is Situs AMC. They're a major mortgage tech provider. They had a huge data breach, basically that just is, I think, still evolving. We are going to be talking about this one well into 2026. Client information, corporate data, billions of documents, and social security numbers caught up in this. And the companies that are basically declaring here 1,500 plus major financial institutions across the United States, and the 800-pound gorillas in the financial industry room: JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, possibly the top 20 largest banks, all of them in the United States. This is a massive, massive one, impacting not just the banks, but the consumers as well. On top of that, breach number two is Salesforce. Salesforce is, again, one of the massive tech players around the world. They got hit in August with a supply chain attack through the SalesLoft system, and essentially tokens basically were stolen and used to get into this. And by virtue of that, we saw a ton of major organizations basically have to declare as well. And I just kept it to basically the security and tech infrastructure. Those companies that secure us were caught up in this breach. Cloudflare, Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, all of those are major heavy hitters. PagerDuty, Proofpoint, which is the spam filtering, Tenable for vulnerability testing, Rubrik for backups, BeyondTrust for security, Nutanix, Workday, so many more got hit as a result of basically these OAuth tokens getting hit. So this is obviously a huge, huge one. It's never a good look. But breach number three, we're going to be keeping this in the United States because Salesforce has competitors, and oh Lord, did Oracle have a bad year as well. Both e-business and health initiatives basically from Oracle got hit. I'm combining these into one, but basically there was a 0-day vulnerability in e-business that was exploited around July or August or so. The Clop ransomware gang, who has been prolific, they were involved in Move It and everything else. They stole a whole bunch data. Just looking at their dark web leak site, there's a whole bunch. Oracle Health got hit, used around the world. It's a huge thing. And you can look at these impacts. Some of the others as well were in construction. So Clop claimed that Bechtel was caught up in this, Bechtel being, I believe, the largest construction company in the world. Not to mention, you can see here, Ivy League schools, Penn, Harvard, Barts Health, NHS is, I believe, the largest UK health provider for the National Health Service there. Union Health in the United States, Christian Care, LifeBridge, on and on and on. This one was absolutely massive as well. And for that, we're going to head north of the border to Canada. And this one bothers me deeply. Obviously, if you're a longtime listener and follower, you know I am a Canadian American. This is something that is absolutely nuts. But the CIRO in Canada, the Investment Regulatory Organization, this was huge. They had a massive cybersecurity threat. And what makes this so damaging to Canada is that basically every financial institution and every financial advisor in all of Canada is basically caught up in this. Basically, if you're a financial advisor in Canada, you are reporting to the CIRO, and the CIRO, the information that they are getting are your entire financial portfolios, your personal ones, your personally identifiable information. They know your stocks, your bonds, what you're trading, what you're selling, if you're doing well, if you're doing terribly. This is damaging to so many people across the entire country in every province. So, not a good look, not a fan of this at all. So, hopefully we'll get some more secure of this. And of course, all the financial advisors are now getting credit monitoring, basically courtesy of the Canadian government. Not a good look. Breach number 5. We're coming back to the United States to one of the most recognizable brands around the entire planet, and that is McDonald's. Yes, there's a McDonald's near you. I promise you, wherever you are listening or watching this, odds are there's one probably in driving distance. And essentially, they have an AI-powered hiring platform called McHire. Right? So if you want to go work for McDonald's, you would go there. And they had Olivia, the chatbot that was basically created by Paradox AI. Essentially, they left a test account open with a default username and password. The password was 123456, and so that was a huge issue. Not to mention insecure direct object references or IDOR in the API, the application programming interface. Basically, an authenticated user could see everybody's information. And by virtue of this, one of the largest employers in the world and one of the most recognizable brands got 64 million applicants and their employees, not to mention Paradox's reputation, basically thrown under the bus. Not a good look. I am not a fan of that. But we get to leave the United States again, and this time we are going across the pond to France. We are talking about Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy. Now, this is interesting because these are some of the most recognizable luxury brands on the entire planet, and they got hit. They had a string of cyber attacks, unauthorized third-party access to internal systems, but LVMH, Louis Vuitton, was very close to the chest on this. They did not explain this one in depth. We will see what happens when GDPR kicks in and all of this. But both Louis Vuitton as a brand and Christian Dior Couture as a brand got hit as well. And what makes this one interesting is that what came out of the woodwork as I was reporting on this, again, every Sunday, I would say, oh, Louis Vuitton's up again, because at least 9 countries or regions had to declare data breaches as a result of this. Basically, LVMH was declaring to South Korea, Turkey, the UK, Italy. So GDPR is going to kick in, Sweden, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, the US, and on and on and on. So this is obviously a huge thing worldwide, given just the presence of this brand. And I think everybody knows basically the brands that they own. Absolutely nuts. And from France, let's go basically to the other side of the world and head down under and talk about Qantas, the largest air carrier in the country of Australia. I've flown Qantas, it's a great airline, but they disclosed that essentially they had a massive credential stuffing attack against their frequent flyer accounts, and this was a huge issue. Potentially 14 million QFF members were caught up in this. That is half the population of Australia. Australia is just under 30 million basically citizens or residents in the entire continent, and so obviously this is a huge issue for Qantas as well. The lawsuits on this have been worldwide. We've seen civil and class action lawsuits filed, not just in Australia, but in the US, UK, Singapore, EU. Qantas is truly an international airline and one of the main ways to get to and from Australia. Great place to visit if you haven't been. I've been there multiple times for business and personal. I absolutely love it. You Aussies are great. Qantas, oh, you got to make sure you're stepping up your game. And from there, let's head on back to the United States. And this is an interesting one, because we're going to be talking about SonicWall. SonicWall is a security vendor. They supply things like firewalls and routers that are supposed to be securing you. But this is one of the largest vendor appliance-driven compromise waves that we have seen. Right? We saw it through MoveIt, which is software. We saw it through Barracuda, which is a competitor to SonicWall and all of that. But basically, they had 2 huge zero-day vulnerabilities within their actual hardware that was basically managing and protecting businesses from the internet. And so the SMA, or Secure Mobile Access platform, basically was exploited, and a ton of organizations got hit. Now, that said, 1,200 organizations basically were compromised starting in December, but ending in January 2025, which is why it makes the list for this year. And if you look at the brands that we're basically talking about, the city of Dallas. So we're talking governments, the Department of Transportation in Idaho, not to mention a whole bunch of healthcare. So there's your HIPAA breaches, Great West Life Co. in Canada, top 20 U.S. accounting firms. Basically, they're not publicly named. A lot of these organizations, due to the sensitivity of what they do, were not named, only the vertical they're in, and so many more of the 1,200. So that is a huge supply chain breach from what should be a trusted vendor for security. There you go. So SonicWall, make sure you're stepping that up. And let's talk about tech vendors here in the United States, because another one of the most recognizable brands in human history has been basically having a bad year too, and that is Microsoft. That's right. In mid-July, threat actors basically began exploiting 0 days in SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint. Now, this was on-premise SharePoint, meaning you had an actual SharePoint server in your office as opposed to using the cloud version of this. One of the arguments for moving to cloud and fully securing the cloud. But basically, what made this so interesting for 2025 is that all of the groups basically looked like intelligence groups coming out of China, or tied to basically state threat actors coming out of China that were hitting Microsoft. And China is no slouch when it comes to attacking Microsoft and other US major infrastructure platform providers like Microsoft's competitors. So this was a huge one that we saw. Linen Typhoon, Violet Typhoon, Storm 2603, they were all there hitting basically SharePoint servers and breaking into companies. And so we had multiple major federal departments in the US government basically acknowledge that they got hit through their SharePoint servers in these department offices. So the DOE, the Department of Energy, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, not to mention California's Independent System Operator, or CAISO, which is actually part of the state of California's government. Multiple universities were caught up in this. This was a complete mess. And so with that, those are the top 9 data breaches. And before we go to the last one, which is, again, arguably the largest data breach in history, let's give an honorable mention out to the 2025 16 billion password dump. And that's what it was. This is not an existing data breach. This is an aggregation of a whole bunch of previous data breaches into basically what's called a combo list of usernames and passwords to the tune of 16 billion basically leaked usernames and passwords. It's absolutely crazy here. Now, we don't know, and I could not find numbers on how many exact unique combinations there are. So that 16 billion, your username and password might be in there 5 times from 5 separate breaches, as would somebody else. So that 16 billion might actually be 8 billion passwords or 2 billion passwords, or maybe it's completely unique. I could not find any kind of information on that, but this is a massive, massive password list, and it really underscores why you should regularly change your passwords and don't use the same password for everything. If your password for Facebook is the same as your bank, for the love of God, please go change that. That is a huge, huge issue. And so with that, let's talk about the largest breach, arguably, in the history of the internet. And for that, we are going to China, because we are talking about China's surveillance network. This is my breach of the year. And again, largest breach in history, arguably, and this is insanely important. The amount of data that got dumped and the type of data that got dumped is not only just incredibly damning to what the Chinese are doing, but it really sheds a light on just how deep Chinese surveillance is. So if you recall, back in January, February or so, basically I reported on this back then, but several cybersecurity researchers and journalists were reporting a massive archive that got dumped from one of the major surveillance contractors across the entire country of China. And what we saw leaked was absolutely insane. So look at this. I mean, billions of facial recognition records from public camera systems, because China is a massive surveillance state. This is what you get when you have authoritarians in power that need to control their population. So a ton of biometrics on Chinese citizens, basically north, south, east, and west, all over the country. Live camera access for thousands of devices just hanging out there. GPS and location tracking logs for individuals the Chinese government was targeting. The watch lists that the police across China had, identity documents, so basically like national ID numbers, demographic data, all this kind of stuff. Remember, China locks a lot of this down. You can look at like the Uyghur population in Western China and how they're heavily surveilled. This is the kind of stuff that we're seeing, not to mention foreign national data. It wasn't as much as Chinese internal data, but travel log, passport scans, all of that. For my business, I've been back and forth to China multiple times over the years, although that was before the pandemic. So I might be caught up in that. We don't know. You know what I mean? These are the things that we are talking about. And then internal Chinese government security workflows, how they're actually gathering this information, surveilling people, absolutely nuts. And not to mention basically the blueprints for the future AI models that would run surveillance on the entire general population. This was huge. So those were your top 10 breaches basically of the year. I didn't mean to make it 10, but it just ended up being 10 with an honorable mention of that massive password leak. But China, you take the cake, you got the breach of the year. And quite frankly, stop hacking everybody. And I know everybody's hacking everybody, but please stop doing that. And that goes for everybody. But those were your breaches. Were you impacted? You were, whether you realized it or not. And with that, thanks for watching. Make sure you're sharing and subscribing, and please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP. Feel free to follow me on YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care, all.